The novel To Live was written by Yu Hua, a well-known Chinese writer. It was first published in 1993 and has since become one of the most famous modern Chinese novels. The story spans several decades of 20th century China, covering major historical events such as the Chinese Civil War, land reform, the Great Leap Forward, and the Cultural Revolution. However, instead of focusing on politics, Yu Hua tells the story of one ordinary man, Fugi, and his personal struggles. Through his journey, the novel explores themes of survival, suffering, and resilience, showing how a simple desire to live can carry a person through unimaginable hardships. Fugi is born into a wealthy landlord family. As a young man, he is arrogant, spoiled, and reckless. He has never experienced hardship and takes his comfortable life for granted. He spends his days drinking, gambling, and visiting brothels with no concern for the future. His father, a strict but traditional man, warns him to be more responsible, but Fugi ignores him. His wife, Jia Zhen, is kind, patient, and devoted to her family. She tries to make Fugi change his ways, especially after she becomes pregnant with their first child, but he does not listen. His addiction to gambling worsens, and soon he loses everything: his family's land, their home, and all their wealth, to a businessman named Long Er. When Fugi returns home to tell his family what has happened, his father collapses from shock and dies soon after. Now penniless, Fugi is forced to leave his home and live as a poor farmer. Jia Zhen, heartbroken by his foolishness, takes their young daughter, Feng Xia, and leaves him for a while. Fugi is left alone to reflect on his mistakes. For the first time in his life, he must work for his survival. He endures long, exhausting days in the fields and experiences the true hardships of being poor. Over time, he begins to understand responsibility. Eventually, Jia Zhen returns, bringing Feng Xia with her. Unlike before, she does not scold him. Instead, she simply accepts their new life and stands by his side. They later have a second child, a son named Yuqing, who brings joy and energy to their small home. Fugi finally embraces the life of a hardworking farmer, no longer the selfish young man he once was. However, peace does not last long. One day, while traveling outside the village, Fugi is captured by the nationalist army and forced to become a soldier. He has no choice but to join them, leaving his family behind. The war is terrifying. Fugi marches across battlefields, witnessing death and destruction everywhere. He is constantly hungry and exhausted, fearing for his life. He befriends an old man named Chun Sheng, another unlucky soldier who just wants to survive. Together, they endure years of war, barely making it through alive. Eventually, the nationalists are defeated, and Fugi is captured by the communist army. Unlike the nationalists, the communists treat their prisoners better. Instead of forcing them to fight, they assign them to labor work. After some time, Fugi is finally released and allowed to return home. When he arrives back in his village, everything has changed. Jia Zhen, who never gave up hope, is still waiting for him. However, during his absence, Feng Xia became seriously ill and lost her ability to hear. Despite her disability, she remains a sweet and hardworking girl, always helping her mother with chores. Their son, Yuqing, is growing up fast. He is mischievous, full of energy, and fiercely protective of his family. Fugi is overwhelmed with emotions. He realizes how much he has lost and how lucky he is to still have a family. He swears to be a better husband and father. Around this time, land reform is happening across China. Since Fugi lost all his wealth years ago, he is no longer considered a landlord and escapes punishment. However, the man who took his land, Long Er, is labeled as a landlord by the communist government. He is publicly executed as a warning to others. Fugi watches in shock, realizing how quickly power and fortune can change hands. It makes him even more determined to live quietly and avoid trouble. But hardship follows them wherever they go. During the Great Leap Forward, the government orders all citizens to donate their iron tools and cookware to be melted down into steel. Farmers are forced to work on steel production instead of growing crops, and soon a famine begins. People in the village starve to death, and food becomes more precious than gold. Fugi's family barely survives on small rations, but just as they think they have made it through the worst, disaster strikes. One day, Yuqing is asked to donate blood to help save the wife of a local communist leader. He is a strong boy and does not hesitate to help, believing it is just a small sacrifice. However, the doctors take too much blood, and he dies. Fugi and Jiazhen rush to the hospital too late. They see their son's lifeless body and their world shatters. Jiazhen falls into deep grief, crying until she has no tears left. Fugi, too, is devastated, but he knows that he must stay strong for the sake of his family. Fangxia, now the only child left, becomes their source of hope. Despite her deafness, she grows into a beautiful and kind young woman. However, because of her disability, finding a husband is difficult. Many families refuse to let their sons marry a woman who cannot hear. But one day, they meet a young man who is kind, honest, and hardworking. He does not care about Fangxia's deafness and truly loves her. They get married, and for the first time in many years, Fugi and Jiazhen feel happiness again. Soon, Fangxia becomes pregnant, and Fugi is excited to have a grandson. However, when she gives birth, there are complications. The doctors are inexperienced, and there is no proper medical care available. She loses too much blood and dies shortly after childbirth. Fugi and Jiazhen are devastated once again, unable to believe that fate has taken another child from them. However, they still have their grandson, Kugan, who is now their only family. They pour all their love and energy into raising him. Jiazhen, weakened by years of sorrow and suffering, eventually falls ill. She knows she does not have much time left. Before she dies, she makes Fugi promise to take care of Kugan and live a simple, peaceful life. Fugi agrees, even though he knows that his heart is already broken beyond repair. After Jiazhen's death, he is left completely alone, with only his grandson and a few old farm animals to keep him company. By the end of the novel, Fugi is an old man who has lost everything: his parents, his wealth, his wife, his children. Yet he continues to live. He takes care of Kugan, telling him stories and walking through the village every day. He no longer dreams of wealth or status. He simply wants to watch his grandson grow up. The novel To Live is a deeply moving story about survival and the strength of the human spirit. Fugi's journey is filled with suffering, but he never gives up. Yuhua masterfully shows how people continue to live even when everything is taken away. The novel is a reflection of China's turbulent history, told through the eyes of one ordinary man. It reminds us that life is not about wealth or success, but about endurance, love, and the small moments that make life meaningful. Despite all the pain Fugi experiences, he finds happiness in the simplest things: his grandson's laughter, the warmth of the sun, the quiet beauty of everyday life. To Live is a powerful tribute to the resilience of ordinary people, and a reminder that even in the darkest times, the will to live is the greatest strength of all.